Hey everyone, this is Peyton. I've had a lot of requests for another tutorial, and since I just released another track on my channel called Valiant, I'll put a link to it here in the description, I thought I would create another tutorial showing you guys how I made this track, what the different elements are, what my techniques and composition are, and that sort of thing. I guess we can first talk about how I like to organize my songs on the circuit. If I'm doing a shorter song or a song that has a lot of repetitive sequences in it, I'll try and make everything in a single session. So if we go here to the patterns view, that usually just means selecting one or two patterns at a time and then moving between those as I'm performing the song. However, the problem is that the circuit only gives you 8 different 16-step patterns to work with. And for most songs, that isn't enough. So what I like to do instead is chain sessions together. So if we go here to the session view, these 7 sessions right here on the very bottom row are the ones that I used for my last track. And what I'll end up doing is switching between those as I'm performing the song. One big benefit of having multiple sessions is that you can have different patches for your 2 synth tracks in each session. In this last track I made, I ended up just using the same synth patches for all of the different sessions, but sometimes I've switched between sessions to be able to give the song a little bit more variety. Another great benefit is all of your parameters are saved exactly how you saved the session. So that means all of your macro values are going to be the same, all of your mixer values and what's currently playing in your mixer, all of your effects values, and so on. So it's a really great way to make big or sudden transitions in your songs. You could save all of your macro parameters to one value for one session, change them all up, and then save that to another session. And as soon as you switch sessions in the session view, it will change all of those macro parameters. So I utilize that a couple of times in my latest track. So as I'm playing the song, I will just move from one session to the next. The circuit has a handy feature where it will wait until the end of the current pattern to switch sessions. So you don't have to worry about hitting it on time or anything like that. Let's take a look at the 2 synth patches I'm using in this song. If we solo the first one, this is what it sounds like. And then this is the second synth patch. Something really important about both of these synth patches is that they're both polyphonic. One really big limitation of the circuit is that you only have 2 synth tracks, which can be really frustrating when you want to have, say, a bass track and a pad track and a lead track and an arpeggio track. You can really only have 2 of those, and so it becomes a little bit harder to fill out your songs with all of the synth voices that you want to. One way to get around this is to have multiple parts within a single synth track. So if we switch to the first synth track and play that, you'll be able to hear I have basically 2 different synth parts going on in this one track. The first part is in the lower registers, and it sounds like this. Playing those notes down there. And then in the higher registers, I have kind of a melody going. Something like that. If I move to synth track 2 and solo that, I basically just have a bass note going. But again, this is a polyphonic patch, so about midway through the song, I start playing up here in the higher registers as a solo, and that way I can have 2 parts going on at once again on one synth track. This is a technique I utilize in a lot of my tracks because, again, you only have 2 synth tracks on the circuit, and I find that to be very limiting. I like to fill out my tracks a little bit more, so I will usually play in both the lower and the higher registers on both synth tracks. The drums for this track are pretty simple. We have the kick drum. It's going through a chain of 4 patterns. The first 3 are the same, and in the last one, there is just a roll going on right here. If we look at the gate function, you can see that I've put in some 30-second notes, I think, on this last note to give it kind of a roll. And that's the only thing that's different about this last pattern. The first 3 are all the same, so nothing too unique there. The snare is exactly the same all the way throughout. If we look at the hi-hats, drum track 3 is utilizing the sample flip feature to switch through a couple of different hi-hats. If we look at which samples are playing here, you can see that it's switching between a couple of different hi-hat samples. And then drum track 4 has one more hi-hat on it, kind of an open hi-hat sound. And then what I like to do is, with these two drum tracks over here, if we go back to the mixer and look at the pan settings, I'll have one track pans pretty far to the left and one track pans a little bit to the right. And so that will give a greater sense of space for these hi-hats. So there are the drum tracks. Again, they're pretty simple. I don't do a whole lot to them throughout the song. I'll just bring them in and out using the mixer here. But besides that, they stay pretty much the same. So if we look at all of that together for one of the sessions, I forgot to mention, I do also have the sidechain on both of these tracks, just a little bit. So if we go back to the session view here, how I wrote the song was I basically came up with 3 main chord progressions in 3 different sessions. Let's listen to all of them chained together right here. So these 3 sessions right here are the 3 main chord progressions. And what I ended up doing was arranging the song in this bottom row of sessions. I would just take one of these right here, I would hit the save button and copy it down here to one of these sessions. And then I would modify the parameters of the session to fit whatever the current mood of the song was. So for example, this first session right here is that first chord progression, but that first synth is soloed and the filter is brought down way low to give it kind of a subdued sound. That's the exact same as this session right here. Just the parameters are different and I've brought in all of the different drum tracks. So I would just copy this one to right here using the save button and to right here. And I repeat that for wherever I want the other different chord progressions in whichever session I've selected. So we start the song out very quiet and subdued with just that first synth brought in. And as I play this, this macro right here is mapped to the filter cutoff, and I'll just slowly bring it up as the song progresses. There are a couple of other parameters up here. I believe this one is filter resonance, so I could play with that if I wanted to. I believe this one's distortion. And I'll just mess with those as I'm playing the song. After it's completed twice, I'll move on here to this next session. You can hear the filter cutoff drop down a little bit again. That's one disadvantage to switching between sessions, is if you're not matching the parameters exactly and you want it to be a smooth transition, it won't be smooth. So you have to be a little bit careful to make sure you've memorized exactly where you've put your values as you've saved sessions. So we'll switch to the next session. Now, I did have the first synth soloed. In this one, I've brought in synth number 2. And you'll see that the drum tracks number 3 and 4 are also brought in, but they're actually silent right now. And so I just start to bring them in with the mixer right here so that it fades in slowly. I can keep bringing out the filter cutoff on this one. Switch sessions. Right there I have the kick and the snare both coming together. I don't have to hit that in the mixer because it's saved in the session for me. When I switch to the next session, oh, that was a little bit early, but the drum tracks, the first two drum tracks, fade out. And then I can stop the hi-hats there. I end up bringing down the filter resonance again so that this first synth track becomes more subdued. And that gives me a little bit of space now that I can play a solo on synth track number 2. So if you remember, this one has just got the bass note that's going on right now. If I go up a couple of octaves, I can start playing notes on top of that. I do have the reverb turned up quite a bit on synth number 2, which is normally not something you'd want to do on a bass note, but because I'm only playing one note and there's plenty of space in between the notes, that's not too much of a problem. You do run into limitations like that. If you had a quick bass going, a lot of different notes, you probably wouldn't be able to put reverb on that because it would just sound muddy and a mess, and you wouldn't be able to play something up in the higher registers with lots of reverb. So you do run into limitations like that, but sometimes those limitations are a good thing and they help you to be a little bit more creative with the tools that you already have. So for a little bit, I just sit here and play notes on top of that bass line. Towards the end of the song, I start bringing in the drums one by one, switching between that, and bringing up the filter cutoff on the other one. And that helps build a little bit of tension. And then finally, the second to last session. You can hear, again, the filter cutoff jumped quite a bit because I didn't quite reach the value before I switched sessions, so you got to be careful of that. And for the very end, I go back to that last chord progression, start bringing down the filter. So there you have it. That's kind of how I performed this last track I made, Valiant. I should have mentioned the synth patches and drums for this track come all from the Team Novation Circuit pack, which is available on the online Novation components editor for free. I believe the two synths were number 8, 16, 24, 27 for the first synth track and number 7 for the second synth track. And then again, the drums just come straight from the Team Novation Circuit pack. So I would love to create another tutorial on how to create your own synth patches from scratch on the circuit in the Novation components editor online. I'll be honest, that's one of my favorite parts of using the circuit. The Nova engine is surprisingly good, and you can get some great deep sounds. You can get some classic analog synthesizer type sounds going, but there's also a lot of really cool modulation parameters that would really only be available in a digital synth to get some really unique and some really interesting sounding sounds going. So look for that in a couple of days. I'll try and get that out as soon as possible. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the music and this tutorial was somewhat helpful to you. If there is anything in the future that you would like to see, please leave a comment below. And I hope you have a wonderful day.